It takes a whole life to learn how to live, and also a whole life to learn how to die. Today we're talking about Seneca on the shortness of life. Now, for many people, this quarantine period is a nightmare. It's a lockdown and it's unpleasant. Now, I'm very careful about the words I use. I prefer to use the word cocoon stage. A cocoon is a space for growth and transformation and change, and that's what I'm definitely trying to do. I'm trying to fill my days with as much wisdom and time for self-reflection as possible. Seneca is the first Stoic philosopher that I've read. This is a very short essay that you can read in maximum 2 hours. In this essay, he attacks this common belief that we have, that life is too short. It's Seneca's belief that it's not that life is too short, or that the gods have been cruel in creating man in such a way that his very existence is trailed by this thing called death. Seneca believes that we have been given an ample amount of time, and that if only we know how to use it, and that we don't allow our time and our attention to be frittered away, our life extends amply and our life is enriched. So one of his arguments is that human beings are generally unconscious. We are unconscious of our drives and motivations which propel us in a direction that we don't necessarily want to be going in, even though our conscious mind just willingly accepts it. So his claim is that we're unconscious of how we use our time, and even when we are using our time at our leisure, our minds are still preoccupied with trivialities or with illusions. And for that reason, a man can never direct his full attention towards those higher aspects of himself. What Seneca says here is that essentially man only lives a short part of his life, and the rest of it he merely exists. Now that's a big statement, but I can see what would lead him to believe that. It's like a dog chasing its own tail. You know, it believes it has free will and that it's exercising its choice, but really it's just going through this endless cycle. And when the dog finally does wake up and realize, oh, I'm just running in circles chasing my tail, by then it's too late. You know, most of life would have passed him. And that's, quite sadly, but quite truthfully also, the way that we spend our lives. In a circle, chasing illusions, and when we do finally wake up, it's too late. Now, that shouldn't be worrying. If you have woken up to this truth, then now is the time for you to be aware of how you're spending your time, aware of where you're directing your energies, to what goals, to which aims and pursuits, to what end. These are important questions that we should ask if we want to live a more fulfilling life, or a life aimed towards the highest aspect of our humanity, which is to love and to share. For Seneca, philosophy was the main vehicle through which he reached this illumination or this enlightenment, because he felt that only through self-reflection and questioning himself thoroughly meant that he could overcome his false reasoning and his false perceptions to live a life that's more aligned with the truth. So I quote from his book: "You must not think a man has lived long because he has white hair and wrinkles. He has not lived long, just existed long. For suppose you should think that a man had had a long voyage who had been caught in a raging storm as he left the harbour, and carried hither and thither, and driven round and round in a circle by the rage of opposing winds. He did not have a long voyage, just a long tossing about." So that kind of reiterates that which I'm saying. The dog chasing its own tail, he might think he's lived a long time, and that he's been progressing upon his path, but really he's just been caught in a cycle. The dog hasn't lived a long life, it's just existed. Now it's quite interesting how Seneca views time. Seneca views the past as a bank of information. The past isn't this thing that no longer exists. It resides somewhere. There's residual emotions attached to the past. And he says that the preoccupied person has no time to even reflect on the past, and for that reason he has no idea of how to use time in the present, and continues to perpetuate this cycle. So he says, "It is the mind which is tranquil and free from care, which can roam through all stages of life. The minds of the preoccupied cannot turn round to look behind them, so their lives vanish into an abyss. So it does not matter how much time we are given, if there is nowhere for it to settle, it escapes through the cracks and holes of the mind." Now, you can see that with the youth of today, and if you look at yourself long enough in the mirror and you reflect on your own life, you'll see it in yourself as well, that we constantly try to fill up every bit of time with something. We despise silence. We despise this idea of not being entertained by anything and just existing in the space of silence. We need something to fill this gap because it's so uncomfortable. So a lot of people during the quarantine period finding it hard because, you know, they're bored and they're trying to fill this time with as much Netflix as possible, with as much TV and junk as possible, because that silence is so unbearable. Previously we had jobs, we had school to go to, university, we had other affairs outside of the home, so we never had to reflect so deeply on ourselves and this gap that exists inside of us that needs an answer. But now that we are locked down, we have no choice but to confront it. So I implore everyone who is at home, who senses this emptiness, don't try to fill it with pointless information and endless hours of TV and music. Rather, try to sink further into that silence, into that emptiness, because that's the key to your next transformation. That's going to unlock the new level of understanding that you need about yourself. It's what Swami Bhakta-Vishita discusses in his book Seership. He talks about going into the silence. He says, when the pupil has ceased to hear the many, he may discern the one, the inner sound which kills the outer. So with that said, if you do feel empty and you do feel bored, don't preoccupy yourself with unnecessary video content and auditory content. Use that time to reflect. Don't try to run away from it. Confront it. Try to go behind that veil to understand why it is you're feeling that way. That's going to reveal an essential part of yourself. And that's what Seneca here seemed to understand. The idea that if you are preoccupied and you don't allow yourself to have a tranquil mind, a meditative mind, to analyze past events and past stages of your life, then you're going to be caught in this cycle. You have to unplug. As uncomfortable as it is, you have to. So all in all, this book was a very transformative read for this quarantine period. I'll leave you with this last quote. People are trifling with life's most precious commodity, being deceived because it is an intangible thing, not open to inspection and therefore reckoned very cheap, in fact almost without any value. People are delighted to accept pensions and gratuities, for which they hire out their labour or their services, but nobody works out the value of time. Men use it lavishly, as if it costs nothing. It is very much so a matter of discipline, training your mind to value things which aren't necessarily perceptible by your five senses. Training your mind to value something which you can't necessarily touch. You can't touch time. It's intangible, you can't hold it, you can't grasp it, but it is very valuable. And it takes time to discipline yourself to a point where you are aware of these imperceptible things in life which are valuable. We've been trained in the West to just value the things that are readily presented to our senses, that appease us and make us feel good in the moment, but that isn't necessarily where the true gems lie. Now, I'm not going to read out everything that I've highlighted because I want you guys to go through the journey of reading this yourself. That's my little book review over. It's quite difficult to condense everything in a short video, and I don't even want to pretend as if my summary of it does it any justice. Make sure you read this. Strongly recommend this. Seneca on the Shortness of Life. So if you enjoyed this video and you want me to continue making more videos where I break down certain books, do leave a comment or leave a thumbs up if it was helpful, and definitely let me know if you've read this in the past or if you're going to read it. I would love to hear your thoughts. So that's it from me. So thanks for watching this video and taking the time out of your day to hear what I have to say. And I hope to catch you guys in the next video. So see you then.